Hey guys, what's up? Max here, Max Plays MTG, and today I have an MTG Modern deck tech for you guys. So today is actually the day one of the Pro Tour just finished, and Matthias Hunt had a record of 7-1, and he was playing this Bloom Titan Amulet of Vigor combo deck. So that is what I have to show you guys today. I just got the last card in today. Really convenient, right in time for the Pro Tour, and I wanted to show it to you guys. So here we go. Alright, so first things first, we're going to start off with the lands, because this is a land combo deck. The lands are going to be the most important thing in the deck. So the first lands I've decided to show you guys are the Gruul lands from the original Ravnica block, and my version is a little different from Matthias's version. My version runs 4 Simic Growth Chamber, 4 Selesnya Sanctuary, a Gruul Turf, a Golgari Rot Farm, and a Boros Garrison, and we'll get into why I've chosen those specific lands later, but these are the Gruul lands I've chosen for the deck. Alright, so the next section of the lands for this deck is the fixing lands. Now we have a bunch of spells and they cost a bunch of different colors, so we've got some cards in here that are going to help us fix our colors and make sure we have the correct amount of mana. As you can see, this is very different from Matthias's deck. Matthias's deck runs 4 Gemstone Mine, 3 of the Modern Masters Rare, and 1 Tendo Ice Bridge. And my mana base is a little different. I only run 2 Gemstone Mine, 1 of the Tendo Ice Bridge, 3 Temple of Mystery, and 1 Temple of Plenty. Now, Matthias's list actually does not run any of the temples, but I think that the temples are really important for this deck, as they can provide early game scry to make sure that you get your combo off, and they can also become resilient in the late game when you're trying to find answers for your opponent's threats. Alright, so these 7 lands make up the rest of the mana base for this deck. This section is what I'm going to call the utility lands, and yes, don't worry, I'm calling the forest a utility land. So, 2 of the utility lands right here, we have Tolaria West, which of course can transmute, searching for things with converted mana cost 0, of course those being other lands, and then we have about 9 other cards in the deck that can be searched by that. And the top row we have a forest. It's really good against Path to Exile. Many of these decks don't run the basic land, but I think that having something for Path to Exile can really help slow the game down. The bottom row, we have a Kessig Wolf Run, a Ghost Quarter, a Slayers Stronghold, and a Spinerock Knoll, and I'll get into those, why those are important later, but that makes up the mana base for this deck. Alright, so now we're starting to get into spells, and the first spells I'm going to show you guys are Deck Manipulation and getting lands into play. So the top row here is Deck Manipulation. This deck runs 4 Serum Visions and 2 Sleight of Hands. I think that mixture is pretty good. Serum Visions is definitely better than Sleight of Hands in this deck. And I'm pretty sure 6 is probably the right number we want. And then on the bottom we have ways to get lands into play. The card on the left is called Summer Bloom. It's a 2-mana sorcery that lets you play 3 additional lands this turn. And then the card on the right is Azusa Lost But Seeking. It's a 3-mana 1/2 that lets you play an additional 2 lands on each of your turns. Matthias Hunt called Azusa a worse Summer Bloom. They're both pretty good, but Summer Bloom can help you combo off on turn 2 while Azusa can't. So that's one of the reasons why I prefer to have the Summer Bloom. Also, I only run 3 Azusa because it's legendary, so if you need you cannot stack them, like you can't have multiple Azusas out there. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the combo pieces that are actually in this deck. Now, the card on the top is Amulet of Vigor. That's what makes this deck run. That's what lets it win on turn 2. That's what can make it win even earlier, but that is probably the most important card in your deck. You don't have to mulligan aggressively to find it because of the amount of deck manipulation and other tutors that you'll see later, but it's definitely everything that makes the combo be as fast as it can be. And the 2 bottom cards are the cards that we can use to abuse. The card on the red is Primeval Titan, of course. It's notorious for being dominant in Standard, and now this deck makes it dominant in Modern too by searching for 2 lands when it enters or attacks. Then the card on the left is Hive Mind, a commander staple that's used sometime in Storm decks. But this card is also very useful for our combo, as we have 9 cards that directly interact with it, and I will get to those right now. Alright, so in here we have some of the tutors that can tutor up our combo pieces. The card on the top is Summoner's Pact. Now this one only searches for Primeval Titan, 0 mana, and I can search my library for a green creature card and put it into my hand. And then at the beginning of my upkeep, I can pay 2 green. I probably should pay that, because if I don't, I lose the game. But this is one of the tutors. You can cast it after casting a bunch of spells because it does cost 0 mana. And, of course, it combos with Hive Mind. The card on the bottom is Wargate. It's one of each of the Bant colors, and that's why, of course, we have the 4 Selesnya Sanctuaries and the 1 of Temple, because we want to be able to have this white for Wargate. Now, Wargate is 3 mana and X. I can search my library for any permanent with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the library, or not put it onto the library, put it into play, and then shuffle my library. So this is really important to get the Hive Mind or to get the Primeval Titan or whatever we need to get out, get it onto the battlefield fast and quickly. Alright, so now let's talk about the Hive Mind combo this deck has. Hive Mind is a 6-mana enchantment that whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, each other player copies it and may choose new targets for the copies. Now, how does that combo with anything? Well, there's these little things called pacts from Future Sight and reprinted in Modern Masters. And what they do is they provide an effect for 0 mana, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 2 colors. Try to get this to focus here. Alright, so you can pay some mana, and what they do is if you don't pay that, you lose the game. So it's kind of like effect now, pay later. And these were designed to be, hey, cool, you know what? It's going to be in the future. We're in the set called Future Sight, so we'll pay now and pay for it later. But they didn't realize that this combos with Hive Mind. For example, I can cast a Pact, and then during my opponent's upkeep, since they have the next turn, they have to pay for the Pact. So even if neither of us have the ability to pay for the Pact, they would have to lose first because they can't pay for the Pact. So what we can do is we can either overload them with a bunch of pacts, casting 3 or 4 pacts in a turn, causing them to pay 14 mana, for example, or we could just play an off-color pact. For example, if my opponent's playing a Bant deck, they can't even pay for the Slaughter Pact here, because that requires a black mana to be paid for. So that is one of the benefits of the deck. Another thing with having these 9 0-mana pacts, of course, 2 Slaughter Pact, 2 Pact of Negation, an Intervention Pact, and 4 Summoner's Pact, is that they can all be searched by Tolaria West. Now, Tolaria West is a 2 of in our deck, and it transmutes, which means we can pay blue, blue, and 1 to discard it and search our library for any card with converted mana cost 0, which includes all of our 9 pacts here and any of the utility lands we have in our deck, main deck, or sideboard. So that is something really cool that we can do with the deck and something nifty like that. Alright, so I've been telling you that this deck is very consistent, can win even on turn 2. So how exactly does that work? So let's take a look at one of these hands that this deck can have. We have a Hive Mind, a Summoner's Pact, a Bounce Land, a Summer Bloom, a Forest, and an Amulet of Vigor. So looking at this hand, this is actually a really nice hand for this deck, even though it's only 6 cards. This hand is very capable of winning on turn 2 without disruption. So turn 1, you can just lay down a Forest and cast the Amulet of Vigor. And then the next turn you win. You untap, you can draw whatever. Then how this interaction works. So I will play my Simic Growth Chamber, which enters the battlefield tapped. Now 2 triggers go onto the stack. The first trigger makes me return a land I control to my hand, and that's of course from the Simic Growth Chamber. And then the second one is that when a permanent enters the battlefield tapped and under my control, I untap it. So what I can do is I can stack the triggers so that my Amulet resolves first, and then my Simic Growth Chamber. So what I do is I can untap it in response to using this first trigger, and then before this second trigger happens, the return a land I control to my hand, I can tap it for a blue and a green mana, and then return it to my own hand. So right now, I have a blue and a green floating. What I can do then is cast Summer Bloom, making me play 3 additional lands this turn. And of course, that is, enters the battlefield, triggers, tap, or untap because of the Amulet, tap for 2 mana, bounce itself, 2 mana floating. And I still have 2 more land drops this turn. And I can proceed to do that, 4 mana floating, 2 more times, 6 mana floating, so I can get 6 mana on turn 2, and then cast a Hive Mind, and just follow it up with any pact, because on turn 2, your opponent isn't going to be able to pay for any of the pacts. Now, what happens if you don't have a pact? Let's say, instead of having the Hive Mind and the pact in your hand, you have a Primeval Titan. So that also is possible on turn 2, because it also costs 6 mana. So, let's say we have Primeval Titan. Now, there's a bunch of nifty things we can search up in order to help our Primeval Titan actually attack for 8 on turn 2, and then also have a bunch of utility later in the game. So one of the most common things I search up for, almost 100% of the time, when this comes on the battlefield, if I have an Amulet of Vigor, is I search for Boros Garrison and Slayers Stronghold. And Boros Garrison is the only non-green of the crew lands that we're running. So the interaction here is very similar to the Simic Growth Chamber. This will enter tapped. This puts a trigger on the stack, so does this. I can choose to untap it first before the return a land trigger happens. Then I can pump my Primeval Titan, giving it +2/+0, then bounce any old land back to my hand off the Boros Garrison trigger, which effectively, Slayers Stronghold, giving the Primeval Titan +2/+0, Vigilance, and Haste. So then the Primeval Titan is actually attacking for 8 the turn it comes into play. So when I attack, there's a bunch of things I can actually search for. One of the things I most often search for is Spinerock Knoll and Gemstone Mine. Now what happens is Spinerock Knoll is a hideaway land. Lets me play the exiled card. Let me try to focus this. Lets me play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if an opponent was dealt 7 or more damage this turn. So these will enter the battlefield. Of course, the Gemstone Mine with 3 mining counters on it. And then my opponent will take 8 from the Primeval Titan after I've hidden away something. And I can actually use the hideaway right this turn to try to get maybe a Hive Mind, maybe an Azusa, even just like a Serum Visions or a Sleight of Hand is very good. And I can get a bunch of things for free, and why not? The other thing I search for if I'm playing against another type of disruptive deck is I'd search for Simic Growth Chamber and Tolaria West. And of course, Tolaria West is a land that transmutes. So when these enter the battlefield, I can return the Tolaria West back to my hand and play blue-green and have a blue floating left over from somewhere to actually transmute this into a pact, such as a Slaughter Pact or even a Pact of Negation, to try to help myself stay ahead and try to not let my Primeval Titan die. So that is how this deck combos off, and that's the deck. Thank you guys so much for watching my video on the Amulet of Vigor Modern Combo Deck. If you're interested, please be sure to subscribe to make sure you're notified whenever I upload a new video. Also, be sure to enter my contest in which you can win one of the 3 Tristani Selesnya's Voice, Nylea God of the Hunt, or Malik Izzet Paragon. Contest will be in the description. Again, thanks so much for watching, and be sure to check out my channel.